Welcome, little sparks of life. I am your uncanny jester, your cynical, spectral guide for today's explainer of a truly dark and fascinating masterpiece. We're going to dive straight into the terrifying, mesmerizing entity known as the Architect of the Great Silence. We'll be breaking down the anatomy, the parables, and the world-altering harvest of the Obsidian Doctor.
You know, they say patience is a virtue for mortals, and I have long since traded my virtues for better punchlines. As your jester, my role here isn't just to sit back and watch this dark play unfold from the sidelines. I'm here to actively guide you through the mechanics of an upcoming harvest. The Sovereign of the Void might be our magnificent lead, but even a god of the grave needs a stagehand to point out his sheer brilliance.
So, let's pull back the bruised velvet curtain on Act 1, the Celestial Alignment, and explore the anatomy of the Void.
Picture this. We're up on a high mountain precipice, right where the breath of the world turns to a chilling violet frost, and we meet our central figure. Now, our lead isn't some mortal physician checking pulses. No, he's a nightmare of impossible geometry, a shadow priest of pestilence. He's literally a god of the grave who thins out in the mist until he's more of a terrifying concept than a man.
You've got to visualize these incredibly eerie details, because his vestments are specifically meant to evoke an ancient dread. He's draped in this obsidian blue silk that just shimmers with a cold metallic light. His face is entirely hidden behind a midnight leather mask with a polished beak reflecting the abyss. And those glass lenses? They absolutely burn with a predatory amber. In his perpetually gloved hands, held up in this mocking benediction, you won't find any sweet healing herbs, just a staff of blackened bone.
The sensory impact of his presence is overwhelming. As he moves, those obsidian robes actually seem to swallow the ambient moonlight, draping a literal funeral shroud over the earth. And the sound? It isn't just the swish of heavy fabric. It hisses like a nest of disturbed vipers, paired with this sickening, low hum. It literally sounds like the vibration of 1,000 fly wings emanating right out of his attire.
1,000! Let that scale sink in for a moment. Behind that polished beak, those predatory amber eyes hold the ledger of 1,000 doomed cities. He doesn't just operate on a local level, he's orchestrating a harvest that spans entire civilizations.
He's incredibly methodical. Standing up there at the precipice, he looks to the bruised purple sky and adjusts the dials of a shimmering, cold metal starfinder. He isn't looking up for hope. Far from it. He is deliberately charting the decay of the weeping constellations. To him, those rotting stars are literal invitations to his feast.
Which brings us right to Act 2, the descent, and the complete rotting of the earth. As the Doctor and I, his cynical, spectral counterpart, begin our descent toward the sleeping valley below, he finally speaks. With a voice that sounds like a chorus of 1,000 parched throats, he says, "The stars are ripe. The silent sowing begins now." And right then, he exhales this cloud of faint, violet frost directly from the beak of his mask, the very seeds of the rot.
Watch the horrific transformation of the landscape as his dark masterpiece unfolds. Down in the valley, you have all the natural beauty of the old world. Quiet villages, golden stalks of grain, sweet herbs, fresh morning dew. But the moment the Doctor's shadow touches the ground, that vibrant grass shrivels into bruised black ash. And as I pour a jar down the mountain, that fresh morning dew permanently shifts into a dark, viscous, oily decay. All those sweet scents completely swallowed up by a foul, overwhelming stench. It's the parable of the overripe fruit. The sickness takes root in complete silence. Tiny, invisible seeds drift from a traveler's silver box, and soon the people just wilt like parched lilies under an invisible heat. Swellings appear on their necks, morbidly described as overripe fruit ready to burst with the secrets of the grave. The earth itself exhales a lethal, heavy breath, entirely stripping away the fragile mask of the old world.
And that pulls us into our final act, Act 3, the final surgery, and the golden labor. Down in the valley, the village elders are desperately attempting to lock their heavy oak gates, but a figure of impossible geometry doesn't exactly need a key. When a local scholar begs to know why he hasn't brought any sweet healing herbs, the Doctor reveals his true, chilling purpose. He hasn't come to heal a sickness of the blood. The rot he brings is the cure. It's a highly symbolic spiritual operation, a final surgery designed to break the fever of a stagnant, dying world.
That staff of blackened bone, it's meant strictly to measure the depth of the graves he has already preordained. This is the unstoppable trajectory of the great harvest. It starts so quietly with the leaking latch, morphs into the visible horror of the overripe fruit, brings the inevitable judgment of the measured grave, and finally culminates in the golden labor. The old kingdom is just crumbled and tilled under like dead weeds. The doctor is essentially pruning the garden of humanity with the shears of death.
So listen closely, little sparks of life. You cannot bargain with the being who has already won the war against time. The parables leave us with this absolute, terrifying truth. When the stars begin to rot and the sovereign of the void begins his measurements, there is no corner of the earth where the fever can hide.
But here is the true, fascinating paradox of his dark masterpiece. The end creates fertile soil. Once that violet frost finally clears, the rigid walls of the old kingdom fall. In a world vastly thinned by death, the surviving laborers look at their calloused hands and realize their labor has suddenly become as precious as gold. They march right up to the manors of the weary lords and demand their freedom. Strange, new growth sprouts from a hollow shell.
And so, as your uncanny jester, I bow out and leave you alone in the quiet ruins to ponder this final question. The parables teach us that destruction and creation are intimately linked in the doctor's ledger. When the old, rigid structures of your world are tilled under by inevitable change, are you ready to build a new world from the ashes of the fever? Think on that.